Thank you. Thank you, Ruth. And now Boris Johnson.
At the end of this campaign, I think you'll agree there is a very clear choice between those on their side who speak of nothing but fear of the consequences of leaving the EU, and we on our side who offer hope. Between those who have been endlessly rubbishing our country and running it down, and those of us who believe in Britain. They say we can't do it. We say we can. They say we have no choice but to bow down to Brussels. We say they are woefully underestimating this country and what it can do. If we vote leave, we can take back control of our borders, of huge sums of money, £10 billion a year net, of our tax-raising powers, of our trade policy, and of our whole law-making system, the democracy that is the foundation of our prosperity. And if we stand up for democracy, we will be speaking up for hundreds of millions of people around Europe who agree with us, but who currently have no voice. And if we vote leave and take back control, I believe that this Thursday can be our country's Independence Day.
So, Mr. Speaker, after 18 months of stealthy retreat, we have come from the bright certainties of Lancaster House to the Chequers Agreement, and you put them side by side. Lancaster House said laws will once again be made in Westminster. Yeah. Chequers says there will be an ongoing harmonisation with a common EU rulebook. Lancaster House said it would be wrong to comply with EU rules and regulations without having a vote on what those rules and regulations are. Chequers now makes us rules takers. Lancaster House said we don't want anything that leaves us half in, half out, and we do not seek to hold on to bits of membership as we leave. Chequers says that we will remain in lockstep on goods and agri-foods and much more besides, with disputes ultimately adjudicated by the European Court of Justice. Far from making laws in Westminster, there are large sectors in which ministers will have no power to initiate, innovate, or even deviate. After decades in which UK ministers have gone to Brussels and expostulated against costly EU regulation, we are now claiming that we must accept every jot and tittle for our economic health with no say of our own and no way of protecting our businesses and entrepreneurs from rules now and in the future that may not be in their interests. My right honourable friend, the Chancellor, was asked to identify the biggest single opportunity from Brexit. After some thought, he said regulatory innovation. Well, there may be some regulatory innovation post-Brexit, but it won't be, alas, coming from the UK, and certainly not in those areas. We are volunteering for economic vassalage, not just in goods and agri-foods, but we will be forced to match EU arrangements on the environment and social affairs and much else besides. And of course, we all want high standards, but it is hard to see, I say to my honourable friends, it is hard to see how the Conservative government of the 1980s could have done its vital supply-side reforms with those freedoms taken away. And the result of accepting the EU's rulebooks and of our proposals for a fantastical Heath-Robinson customs arrangement is that we have much less scope to do free trade deals, as the Chequers paper actually acknowledges, and which we should all, frankly, acknowledge. Because otherwise, if we pretend otherwise, we continue to make the fatal mistake of underestimating the intelligence of the public, saying one thing to the EU about what we are doing, and then saying another thing to the electorate. And given that in important ways, this is, buy no or brino or Brexit in name only, I'm of course unable to accept it, as I said, or to support it, as I said in the Cabinet session at Chequers. And I'm happy now to speak out against it and be able to do so. Mr. Speaker, it is not too late to save Brexit. We have time in these negotiations. We have changed tack once, and we can change again. The problem is not that we failed to make the case for a free trade agreement of the kind spelt out at Lancaster House. We haven't even tried. We must try now, because we will not get another chance to get it right. And it is absolute nonsense to imagine, as I fear some of my colleagues do, that we can somehow afford to make a botched treaty now and then break and reset the bone later on. Because we have seen, even in these talks, how the supposedly provisional becomes eternal. And we have the time, and I believe the Prime Minister has the support of Parliament. Remember the enthusiasm for Lancaster House and for Mansion House. And it was clear last night, that there is no majority in this House for a return to the customs union. With goodwill and common sense, we can address the concerns about the Northern Irish border and all other borders. We have fully 2.5 years to make the technical preparations, along with preparations for a world trade outcome. Those preparations which we should now accelerate. We should not and need not be stampeded by anyone. But let us, again, aim explicitly for that glorious vision of Lancaster House, a strong, independent, self-governing Britain that is genuinely open to the world, not the miserable, permanent limbo of Chequers, not the democratic disaster of ongoing harmonisation with no way out and no say for the UK. We need to take one decision now before all others, and that is to believe in this country and in what it can do. Because I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that the UK's admirers, and there are millions, if not billions, across the world, are fully expecting us to do what we said and to take back control and to be able to set new standards for technologies in which we excel, to behave not as rules takers, but as great independent actors on the world stage, and to do free trade deals, proper free trade deals for the benefit and the prosperity of the British people. That was the vision of Brexit that we fought for. That was the vision that the Prime Minister rightly described last year. That is the prize that is still attainable. There is time. And if the Prime Minister can fix that vision once again before us, then I believe she can deliver a great Brexit for Britain, with a positive, self-confident approach that will unite this party, unite this House, and unite this country as well.
Now, as my friend Paul, a former colleague Paul Goodman might confirm, I am not naturally of a timid disposition. It is not my way to confide my innermost fears, but since this is only a fringe meeting and unlikely to be widely reported, I will reveal that I have one overriding anxiety about the current political scene, both domestic and international. And it isn't global warming or terrorism or Rouhani's Iran or Putin's Russia, real though those challenges are. It isn't the negotiating tactics of Jean-Claude Juncker, whether before or after lunch. It's not even the economic and political catastrophe that would befall us in the event of a Corbyn government, horrifying though I find that idea. My friends, the one thing I really worry about in this critical autumn of 2018 is that after 200 years, this oldest and most successful of all political parties
should somehow lose confidence in its basic belief in freedom, and that after 1,000 years of independence, this country might really lose confidence in its democratic institutions, and that we should be so demoralized and so exhausted as to submit our institutions forever, indefinitely, to foreign rule. And if I have a function here today, it is to try, with all humility, to put some lead into the collective pencil, to stop what seems to me to be a ridiculous seeping away of our self-belief, and to invite you to feel a realistic and justified confidence in what we can do. Not in a spirit of jingo or glib partisanship, because I know that this is a time of trial. And it is precisely because our position is so serious and the decisions before us are so vital that it is more necessary than ever that we feel that quiet and legitimate confidence in our country. I can see that the utilities have cunning ways of ripping off the consumer. But the occasional failure of markets, no matter how conspicuous, does not mean that state control is better. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't follow. I listened carefully to Jeremy Corbyn last week, and it was astonishing that he had absolutely nothing to say about the wealth-creating sector of the economy. The people who get up at the crack of dawn to get their shops ready, the grafters and the grifters, the innovators, the entrepreneurs. He didn't mention any successes. He didn't mention a single sector of the British economy. Nothing interested him, except insofar as he wants to nationalise 10% of every company of more than 250 employees. The only organisation whose output he singled out for praise was Preston Council. I'm sure they're a great bunch in Preston Council, but they are not the locomotive of the UK economy. And we Conservatives know it's only by a strong private sector that we can pay for superb public services. And that's the central symmetry of our one nation Toryism. It's only by making the streets safer, and by the way, don't you think it's time we brought back systematic stop and search to end the politically correct nonsense. End the politically correct nonsense that has endangered the lives of young people in our capital and elsewhere. It's only by putting in the infrastructure that enables people to live near their place of work. It's only by having a properly funded NHS to give people the peace of mind they need. And by the way, let's get that extra funding into the NHS now. It's only by making sure that young people have the skills and the training that they need that you can create, by that public investment, you can create the platform for businesses to grow and succeed. And that is how to solve the UK's productivity puzzle. It is that virtuous circle, that symmetry, that means we must, on no account, follow Corbyn and start to try to treat capitalism as a kind of boo word. We cannot lose our faith in competition and choice and markets, but we should restate the truth that there is simply no other system that is so miraculously successful in satisfying human wants and needs. And we should set our taxes at the optimum rate to stimulate investment and growth, and we should not be constantly aiming to increase, but rather to cut taxes. If we get this right, it can be win-win for both sides of the channel. And if we get it wrong, my friends, if we get it wrong, if we bottle Brexit now, believe me, the people of this country will find it hard to forgive. If we get it wrong now and we proceed with this undemocratic solution, if we remain half in, half out, we will protract this toxic, tedious business that is frankly so off-putting to sensible middle-of-the-road people who want us to stop talking about Europe and get on with their domestic priorities, as we should be.
and who currently feel that they have, because of the level of Brexcosis, that they have no home in any political party. It's true. If we cheat the electorate, and Chequers is a cheat, we will escalate that sense of mistrust. We will give credence to those who cry betrayal, and I'm afraid we will make it more likely that the ultimate beneficiary of Chequers will be the far right, in the form of UKIP, possibly others, and therefore the far left in the form of Jeremy Corbyn. Other way around, if you're me. Jeremy Corbyn, by the way, a man who takes money from Iranian TV, who can barely bring himself to condemn the Russian state for the Salisbury atrocity, and who indulges anti-Semitism, and who, by opportunistically now committing himself to a second referendum, reveals himself to be the patsy of the EU as well. We cannot allow that to happen. We must not allow it to happen. And so, for one last time, thank you all for coming along here today. And I hope you will join me in urging our friends in government to deliver what the people voted for. To back Theresa May in the best way possible by softly and quietly and sensibly supporting her original plan. And in so doing, to show confidence in conservatism and to show confidence in our country. Because if we get it wrong, we will be punished. But if we get it right, we can and will have a glorious future, and this government will be remembered for having done something brave and right and remarkable and in accordance with the wishes of the people. Thank you very much.